you can't expect that our state will be for you, guided by science that is backed up by lived experience. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list, I have Dr. Kelsey Leonard Smith. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Chair Beckerfin and committee members, my name is Dr. Kelsey Leonard Smith. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the interim medical director and director of the Child and Adolescent Transgender Care Program at Family Tree Clinic in Minneapolis, as well as a family physician who cares for children and their families across the lifespan. Today I'm here speaking in support of House File 146 on behalf of Family Tree Clinic. I would consider myself a very lucky doctor, blessed to spend my days with a beautiful diversity of patients and families, but caring for transgender children and young adults has been the most rewarding part of my career. They've taught me so much about what it means to be human, and supporting them through gender-affirming care, getting to watch them thrive, is an incredible gift. But their thriving and access to life-giving medical care should never be in question. It is the mere fact that our kids have to live in a world where their access to health care is being limited and debated that puts them at risk. When I say gender-affirming care, what does that mean? Well, at Family Tree Clinic, it means something different to each child and family. It means meeting them and their families wherever they are on their journey through life and working as a team to provide evidence-based care appropriate to their developmental stage. It might mean coaching one child's parents on how to help grandma get a new name right, or how to safely find a chest binder and use it correctly. We know that something as simple as using a child's chosen name at school or at home can reduce things like suicidality by 56%. As Dr. Gepford mentioned, there are no medical interventions that we use in children before puberty. At Family Tree Clinic, we practice in line with the World Association of Transgender Health and the Endocrine Society. In adolescents who have already begun puberty, we do sometimes use medications to prevent that puberty process from causing permanent changes that could lead to lifelong distress. In older adolescents who have passed certain milestones of intellectual development and who can demonstrate their capacity to make medical decisions, along with the consent of their legal guardians, we may initiate semi-reversible hormonal medications. In young people, medication doses are low, changes are very slow to develop, often to their frustration. At each follow-up visit, we're really reassessing this person's needs. What does the person sitting in front of us need today, and what do we think you're going to need 10 or 20 years from now? We use these medications because they work, and I have the kind of job where patients and families routinely cry from joy in my office and relief because they feel so much better. We use these medications because the studies that compare patients who were able to access them with those who wanted to access them but could not have found dramatic long-term improvements in quality of life and mental health. At Family Tree Clinic, we've long served patients from across the upper Midwest, but in the past 2 years especially, that reach has really expanded further as families travel and relocate to prevent disruptions in their child's care. Our staff have fielded just heartbreaking phone calls from parents in Texas, Arkansas, Florida, who are terrified for their child's well-being. As a parent of 3 young children, such fears really resonate deeply with me. I know one family who actually chose to replace their car because they were afraid that legal changes would push them to flee the country and that their unreliable vehicle might not make it all the way to the border. In Minnesota, we have a long history of protecting the rights of LGBT people, something I'm very proud of, and I'm really grateful to Representative Finke for introducing House File 146. This bill protects vital life-saving health care in our state. It reminds us that for many, waiting for care and preventing access to expert medical teams is harmful. It reminds us that transgender kids belong everywhere and have the right to thrive everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have Christy Hall and then Krista Mosing on deck. All right, not seeing Christy.
I haven't seen Christy. This
Okay,
morning yet.
Krista Mosing. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Chair Becker-Finn, members of the committee. My name is Krista Mosing. My pronouns are she, her. I've been a licensed Minnesota attorney since 2008. I've served as a state executive branch attorney in various roles since 2011, and I'm the current chair of Inclusive, the LGBTQIA+ resource group for state employees. I'm testifying before you today in my personal capacity. I'll first briefly touch on the legal context of House File 146 and then discuss the effectiveness and enforceability of its provisions. Minnesota has a long history of leading the recognition and protection of the human rights of trans people. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Minnesota becoming the first state to enact a law protecting the human rights of trans people. Minnesota's human rights law borrows language from a 1975 Minneapolis ordinance protecting trans civil rights. Yet now anti-trans legislation is expanding. In 32 states, nearly 250 bills are currently under consideration that would single out trans people for discriminatory treatment of their privacy, their family relationships, and their rights to access public accommodations and health care. House File 146 would protect children, families, and caregivers in Minnesota from extraterritorial laws and orders that could interfere with the right to receive gender-affirming health care in Minnesota. The bill could offer some protection to children, families, and care providers when people travel to Minnesota for gender-affirming health care and then return to a state with such a law. Sections 2 through 4 of the bill amend the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act. These sections clarify how to implement the bill's policy favoring child health and welfare when performing a child custody jurisdictional analysis. These provisions are narrow in scope, focusing on jurisdictional analysis to ensure that the state's interest in the child's welfare is not unnecessarily relinquished. The approach taken in House File 146 appears to be consistent with federal law. Sections 6 through 10 amend the Uniform Criminal Extradition Act. The extradition-related provisions will protect individuals and families by preventing their removal for exercising their rights in Minnesota. These sections are narrowly tailored to circumstances where Minnesota's discretion is not constrained by federal law. Sections 6, 7, 9, and 10 concern only acts committed in or services received in Minnesota. Sections 7 and 8 amend provisions where extradition is discretionary and not mandatory. The careful tailoring of these provisions ensures that they are likely, effective, and enforceable. For these reasons, the bill does not appear to interfere with any obligation to accord full faith and credit to acts, records, and judicial proceedings of another state. Overall, House File 146 would protect healthcare recipients and providers who are subject to Minnesota's jurisdiction from undue interference and attempted punishment by or through the laws of another state. This bill is not merely a statement. It would substantively strengthen Minnesota's human rights advantage among the United States.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, I have Kat Rohn, and then on deck, I have Rebecca Delahunt. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. Thank you, Representative Finke, Chair Becker-Finn, committee members. My name is Kat Rohn, and I am the Executive Director for Outfront Minnesota, our state's largest LGBTQ advocacy organization, and I am a proud member of our state's trans community. Today, I come to offer my support for HF 146 to help ensure Minnesota is a place of refuge for transgender and gender-expansive individuals, supportive families, and care providers. Trans and gender-expansive individuals know who we are, and we thrive when we are given the support and care we need. This bill is unfortunately all too necessary as lawmakers across this country seek to limit access to critical, life-affirming care. As Representative Finke noted, just this last week, Utah became the first state this year to ban gender-affirming care for minors, following a number of other states last year, and more than 20 other states have bills under consideration currently, including our immediate neighbors of Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And there is every indication that this climate is worsening. The onslaught of legislation is having a real impact on the LGBTQ+ community. During 2022, as harmful laws advanced, I had conversations with a friend in Arkansas who had hoped to find their child an appointment for hormone therapy, only to watch in dismay as the state passed an outright ban on that care. A parent in Texas who I connected with legal resources after that state began investigating supportive families with trans children. One in Iowa who reached out to ask if Minnesota would be a safe state to raise their trans child. And I can point to countless more like those. It is critical that Minnesota takes a proactive stance on this issue. We cannot sit idly by while other states work to end essential evidence-based care. And I want to lift up the generations of trans and gender diverse people who have persevered, flourished, and laid the foundation for folks like me to live full and joyful lives here in this state. I urge you to advance this bill to continue Minnesota's long history of protecting trans and gender diverse individuals and to send a message that we are welcome and valued here in this state. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I have Rebecca Delahunt and then Casska Saras on deck. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Rebecca Delahunt, and I work as the Acting Director of Public Policy with Minnesota Family Council. HF 146 takes away custody from parents or guardians who deny their children access to gender-affirming health care, puberty blockers, and cross-sex hormones. Let's take a brief look into these drugs. The Office of the U.S. Surgeon General reports sex hormones are extremely important in regulating the growth of the skeleton and maintaining the mass and strength of bone. A longitudinal study of a pubertal person undergoing hormonal treatment found that after 28 months of treatment, speed processing and memory of the patient were lower than before hormonal treatment. Loss of sexual function, bone density, and interference with brain development are just a few of the risks that puberty blockers pose for children who are told that this is a simple pause on puberty. Not only that, but in a clinical study of 70 children who were taking puberty blockers, all 70 of them later took cross-sex hormones. NHS of the UK claims cross-sex hormones cause some irreversible changes, and long-term cross-sex hormone treatment may cause temporary or even permanent infertility. Knowing that puberty blockers can lead to these side effects, let's look again at HF 146 at line 2.28. A court of the state has temporary emergency jurisdiction if the child is present in the state and the child has been unable to obtain gender-affirming health care. Under HF 146, parents lose custody rights if they make decisions based off concern for bone density and sexual function of their daughter. Members, based on today's short analysis of scientific research, I'm asking you to vote no on HF 146.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I have Casska Saras and then Kelsey Waits on deck. Please introduce yourself for the committee and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members and Representative Finke for having me. My name is Casska Saras. I am a non-binary trans person and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I live in St. Paul and I am here this morning to express my support for House File 146. We in Minnesota pride ourselves on being the best of the best in every way possible. This bill would be just another example of that in a time when we need it the most. Trans people are under attack across this country, especially and unfortunately, trans kids. I serve on several committees for a group called Tigers, where we work primarily with trans, intersex, and gender-expansive kids and their families to help them find community. We do this in part through holding space for kids and teens to connect online and in person with COVID safety restrictions in place, or procedures, excuse me. These meetings also allow parents to connect just the same. The work we do makes our community strong, and so would this bill. You may have seen stories about people moving from places like Texas and Florida to find safety for their families. Well, one of the places they're finding that safety is here in Minnesota, and that warms my heart. I am grateful to know that trans people like my partner and myself are protected in this state. But in the spirit of Minnesota Nice, I think we can go further. Some might say that this bill is revolutionary, but if it's advanced and passed anyway, the impacts will be anything but. This bill would provide an extra sense of security for families who just want the best for their kids. So that's what we all want, right? I am not the parent of a trans kid. I do not know what it's like to have to hide or to uproot your family and move, sometimes across the country, because of dangerous laws and dangerous people targeting your kids. But I am a trans adult. And even though I came out just a few years ago, I am an example of what can happen after a trans kid has a chance to thrive, to flourish, and to live as their true self. Committee members, I urge you to advance House File 146 to help other trans kids here in Minnesota and across the country get that chance. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Kelsey Waits and then Hannah Edwards. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Kelsey Waits. My pronouns are she, her. I am a constituent of Representative Nguyen's. I am a proud parent of a transgender child, and I am also on the leadership team of Transparent Alliance, which is an organization aimed at providing education and support to parents of transgender youth. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people, and transgender youth are about 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their cisgender peers. Research finds that trans youth are not prone to suicide risk due to their gender identity, but rather they are at a higher risk because of how they are treated by society. Research also shows that parental support changes these statistics, because when trans youth are supported and affirmed in their identities, they thrive. And yet, in states across the country, lawmakers are seeking to criminalize the very support that can save a child's life, putting parents in an unimaginable position. Do they seek affirming health care for their child in a different state and risk criminal prosecution? Or do they instead try to closet their child, dramatically increasing their child's risk of attempting suicide? A year and a half ago, my child was outed in our community. We experienced harassment due to their gender identity and have since moved. The messages that my child received from individuals in our community has had a large impact on their mental health. For many youth, it is not only individuals in a community sending these hateful messages, but the state itself. Minnesota has a chance to stand against this hate and save lives. Minnesota has a chance to protect families who are seeking the life-saving, gender-affirming care that is recommended by every major medical organization. Every major medical organization. It is not enough to stay silent in the face of bigotry and hate that is sweeping across this country. As Desmond Tutu said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. I urge you to support HF 146 and support families with transgender children who need their access to health care protected. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And then finally, I have Hannah Edwards. Please introduce yourself and go ahead with your testimony.
Yeah, good morning, representatives. My name is Hannah Edwards, and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you to Representative Finke for leading the work on this bill and for being a role model for my trans daughter. I'm here today because I'm the parent of an amazing 12-year-old transgender girl. I am also currently serving as the director of Transforming Families Minnesota. We're the state's largest and longest running support network for trans youth and their caregivers. We run 4 monthly support meetings where our 800+ members get support and share resources. I am so thankful that my family lives in the state of Minnesota, where my trans kid can access the health care that she needs to be healthy and happy. We have a fantastic care team at HCMC that she's been seeing since she was 8 years old. As the director of Transforming Families, I'm also here and there to answer emails and calls that parents and caregivers put in from all across the state of Minnesota looking for resources. I'm glad that I can direct those families to one of the many great gender-affirming clinics we have here in Minnesota. However, as the parent of a trans child and the director of Transforming Families, I also see many times where this is not the case. Right now, we have friends in Texas who are moving because they cannot safely get their trans child the care that they need. I weekly see parents post in the national groups that I am a part of to ask about which states will be safe for families with trans kids to seek refuge. We like to think that this is something that happens in states like Texas, Arkansas, Florida, Utah, but it isn't. Last Friday, an email came to the Transforming Families inbox from a scared mom of a trans kid in South Dakota. This mom was worried that her teenager, who was asking to start gender-affirming care, wouldn't be able to access it. She knew that South Dakota would not be a safe place for this. She was wondering if she came across the border to Minnesota, could she safely access care here? My 12-year-old is happy. She's creative. She loves to sing and act and perform. She's an amazing big sister. She is healthy and thriving, and that's because of what we offer here in Minnesota. This should be the reality for all trans youth. Please make Minnesota a beacon for those seeking care. Let us say to that parent from South Dakota that you and your trans child are safe to seek care in Minnesota. Healthcare is a human right, and all trans youth and their families deserve access to gender-affirming care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That wraps up the folks I had signed up ahead of time. Are there any other members of the public wishing to testify on this bill? Please introduce yourself for the committee and go ahead with your testimony.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Renee Carlson. I serve as General Counsel for True North Legal. For children in Minnesota, getting an ear pierced and going on a field trip require parental consent. But HF 146 arguably bypasses parental engagement for something more significant, their child's medical decision making. This completely contradicts the myriad of case law regarding parental rights, both in Minnesota and the United States Supreme Court. The proposed bill also undermines the jurisdiction of courts across the country, impacting parents nationwide because an unfit parent in a state court outside of Minnesota can still bring that child to Minnesota to get a life-altering medical treatment. House File 146 codifies experimental medicine into law despite studies and data from experts around the world who have taken a step back from the previous approach. New England's National Health Service is an example where, quote, NHS found that after a systematic review of evidence, it was appropriate to issue new draft guidance for the treatment of gender dysphoria in minors, which sharply deviates from the, quote, gender-affirming, end quote, approach, end quote. This bill champions what detransitioners refer to as medical malpractice. While other states are passing legislation to protect children, House File 146 enables kidnapping of children to escape custody orders, creating confusion and increased litigation for the courts, while stripping parents of their fundamental rights and encouraging young children on a dangerous path to self-destruction. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Please introduce yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative. My name is Nguyen, that's H-A-O, last name N-G-U-Y-E-N. My wife and I are here today because we have a trans child. But I think a little history is important, and certainly it's not about my wife and I or me, but I came to this country when I was 9 years old from Vietnam. We were refugees. We were part of the South. We fled, and we came here. I'm a child of public assistance. I'm a child of English as a second language, which is now ELL. I became a police officer and served this state for 5 years, and I've been a member of the criminal justice system as a lawyer for the last 13. And although I'm a director of a very large prosecution division, I'm here in my capacity as a father. I talk about those things because as a person of color, sometimes you have to legitimize yourself to the group. You have to legitimize yourself with your voice, your cadence, and your mimicking. Sometimes you have to mimic whiteness to get success. But today, I do all those things, and we do all those things, my wife and I, because we can give Asher a voice. Asher is 6 years old. At 3, she was not sleeping very well. She was waking up every single night. It was a lot more than just a toddler waking up. And one day I picked her up from daycare, and all the teachers had said, Asher told us that she's a she. And I said to these wonderful daycare people who had never had a trans kid before at a pretty religious place, so what'd you do? And they said, we called her a her. And I said, great. Oh my God, great. And Asher comes around the corner and I said, hey, there's my beautiful daughter. And I think there are a few things in this world that I'll remember for my whole life, and that is one of them. The smile on her face, the look of affirmation, the confidence she had to tell her teachers who had known her since diapers that she was a she. Didn't matter that she was born with a penis. That her father said, there's my beautiful daughter. That's what Minnesota should be. That's who we are. We are a state that invites refugees to become educated, to become professional, to become public servants, to then add to this state. We are a state that encourages wonderful love and openness, who then can raise a trans child who then will stay here and add to this community and develop it even further. We are people who come and vote and then run for office and make us stronger. That's who we are. This stuff about kidnapping and mutilation, that's all just fear stuff. That is all just scare everybody things. There's a 6-year-old girl that is at home. My wife was talking to her this morning. Gretchen was talking to her this morning. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional. It was last night. Hey, we're going to go to the Capitol. We're going to look at this bill. There's this really wonderful person, you know, all this stuff who delivered the bill. And Asher goes, yay! And Gretchen thought, oh my God, she understands what we're talking about. No, she found a little golden penny that she had lost on the steps for like 6 months. Asher doesn't care. Not yet. Asher can't speak for herself. Not right now. But we can. My wife and I can. There are people here who are trans who have spoken. There's a representative who's fighting for that. So it isn't about fear. Stop scaring people. Let parents, with the help of educated professionals who are medical doctors, decide what is best for their child. And then when that child gets older, they get to decide too. I urge you to do what really has led to my success in this state, what has really led to, you know, my willingness and wanting to stay in public service and work, which is what Minnesota is. We are a haven, we are a leader, and today I would urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have anybody else from the audience wishing to testify? You can come down. Please introduce yourself for the committee and go ahead with your testimony.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Amber Mum. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the St. Cloud Hive of the Parents and Allies of Trans Youth, the Transgender Movement for Liberation, and a member of the Tea Time Support Group run by the Aliveness Project. I am also a proud transgender woman, but more importantly, I am the mother of 2 wonderful transgender and gender expansive children. I drove down from St. Cloud to show my support for House File 146 and to thank Representative Finke for introducing such an important and life-saving bill to protect trans children and their families at such a critical time for us. As you may be aware, there's a torrent of damaging, ill-informed, and outright malicious legislation being introduced across the country, targeting transgender and gender-expansive people broadly, but trans children in particular. It is our daily experience to be forced to keep track of which state is safe for us to visit. Minnesota has been overall very accepting and supportive of our family, but even then we don't feel 100% safe and assured that we will be able to get the gender-affirming care that both of my kids need and deserve. very recently, an amendment was proposed to House File 16 in Minnesota, which bans children's conversion therapy in an attempt to ban essential health care for transgender children. This happened in our state. Because of this, my trans partner and I frequently discuss plans to flee the country if these targeted, hateful bills keep being introduced or passed. I never thought that it would come to this, but here we are. Even in a state that is considered safer for trans children and their families, being forced from our homes and having to seek asylum elsewhere is an almost daily conversation in my community. As someone who started transitioning well into her adulthood, I know better than most how essential and life-saving gender-affirming medical care is. Going through natal puberty was a traumatizing experience for me. I am so grateful that trans and gender-expansive kids have access to the knowledge and medical care to be their full selves and thrive. To not only deny them life-saving medical care, but to charge and prosecute supportive parents and healthcare professionals is barbaric and morally repugnant. House File 146 would give parents of transgender children like myself, and more importantly, transgender and gender-expansive children themselves across the nation, a safe haven and in an overwhelmingly supportive community. I urge the committee to move House File 146 forward and ultimately pass it to protect the rights and futures of our beloved and precious transgender children and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone else from the public wishing to testify, if you could move closer to the table so we can fit folks in, that would be helpful. Yep. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Mo Mac Williams, M-O-M-A-C Williams, and when I came out as trans in 2015, I never expected that within a decade we would be facing the sorts of genocidal policies that we are across the country. And when I say genocidal, I mean denying health care to trans youth does not reduce transness, does not make transness go away. It makes people go away. And I really just wanted to sit here and express how intense it feels to have accessed care after years of needing care. Finally accessing it is really amazing. And then to see people want to take that away is heartbreaking. I'm confused. I would recommend you do some soul searching and a little reflection on what may have made you think that kids don't deserve bodily autonomy. Protect trans kids, protect trans lives. We matter. Stop killing us. Thank you for the bill. I really, really appreciate it.
Sorry for the disrespect you were shown.
Oh, it's okay. I didn't notice. It's all good.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to testify? Come on up. Yep, we have to wrap up the committee in 3 minutes, so. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, I'll try to talk fast. I could talk for hours, but I think I can make it short. My name is Shelly King. My pronouns are and have always been she, her. I'm very comfortable with who I am, and I'm very comfortable with having two teenagers who are both in the LGBTQIA mafia. One considers themselves non-binary. We're in the process of getting their name legally changed right now. And the other one is still figuring out exactly where they are. They are who they are. And this is sharing maybe more personal information than they would want to share if they were here personally. Both of them have attempted suicide as teenagers, trying to figure out who they are and live as who they are openly. We've had a very comfortable honest relationship with our kids and respectful of their needs from birth on up in our family. We live in a liberal bubble of supportive families in our neighborhood in St. Louis Park. Our children have always known that they are loved and cared for within our bubble. But living in our community, even in a relatively liberal part of our liberal state, they feel rejection on a regular basis. And they have gone to treatment, like inpatient partial hospitalization treatment that often involves group therapy. And in that group therapy, they've encountered other kids just like them who are trying to find their identity and feel comfortable with who their body and their brain tells them that they need to be. And those kids are dealing with parents and families who are throwing away their underwear of choice, or who are refusing to call them by their pronouns that are appropriate for them. And that is causing those children trauma on top of the trauma that they face every day in our community by people who give them dirty looks, don't want to be their friends, think that there's something wrong or evil with them. And what I want to tell you is that my children are the most, and the people, trans people that I have met and encountered in this world, you know what, there is good and bad, sinful and saints everywhere you go in every aspect of our society. But most of the trans and LGBTQ people I've met, they are the kindest, most gentle and giving people because they know how hard it is to be judged, so they give grace to everybody else. And to the people who are parents in this world who are afraid of affirming gender, this is the last thing I have to say. I know our time is short. My biggest thing that I hold on to is I love my kids so much. I want them to be alive this year and next year and when I am older. And I want them to be willing to talk to me. I want to have a strong relationship with my children. And for adults who refuse to accept their children the way they are, guess what? You're not going to see them much once they turn into adults and have their own financial freedom. They're going to push you away. I'm sure you've seen stories in the news about boomers complaining that their kids won't talk to them anymore. I can guarantee you, as a human being to another human being, your children will reject you if you reject them. And as our state, we need to set it up so it's less scary for parents to stand up and affirm their children. And we need to make it safe for people from other states to do the same. Let's be the proud, wonderful, caring, giving state that Minnesota has always tried to be. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing this.
We're going to have to wrap up. I do want to thank all the testifiers and thank everybody who is here, especially those who shared some vulnerable testimony. It really is important for us to have that on the record. Representative Finke, and we're laying this over. I recognize the first time that we've ever heard this issue that it was probably going to take up some more time. So at a future date, we'll have time for committee discussion on the bill. But at this time, I'll let you have the closing words, Representative Finke.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Chair Becker-Finn. Thank you, members, for listening. And thank you to everyone from the community that came. This is our first convening, but it will not be our last. And yeah, let's keep up the good fight.
All right, we're going to end as close to on time as I can. And with that, the bill is laid over and we are adjourned.